Welcome to the Profile Corner. Today's video is part 12 in the box corner joint series. In the last video we created a box joint which looks like this. In today's video we'll be creating dovetail joints in box corners. Just as you can see here, this is a half-blind dovetail. I use half-blind dovetails in the drawer boxes for my horizontal pantograph cart. I'll show you pictures of those now. In front of me I have an old Porter Cable Omnijig 7116. This is capable of creating dovetail joints up to 24 inches across. I also have in the shop a Porter Cable 5116. Which is capable of creating dovetail joints 16 inches across. That one is an older jig, probably from around 1989 or early 1990s. This jig was produced in the mid-1990s or late 1990s. I picked this one up from Canada 2 years ago, and I paid somewhere around $340 for it, including shipping and taxes from Canada. I was after this one because it not only does it do half-blind dovetails, it'll also do adjustable through dovetails. I won't be doing through dovetails on the jig today. We'll be using instead my horizontal pantograph machine for that. So let's get started here with going through what it's going to take to get this jig set up in order to use it. I'm going to point the camera down so that you can see it more closely, what I've got here on the table. The Porter Cable Omnijigs are heavy-duty tools that were meant to last a lifetime. This one is quite old, as I mentioned earlier. Porter Cable is no longer making large dovetail jigs like this one. They do have small 12-inch wide units, which may work for you, although they tend to flex a little bit, and so you'll want to watch out for that. Make sure you watch the reviews for those before you buy them. If you can find one of these old Omnijigs, possibly on eBay or through Marketplace, they may be a good pickup for you to get, although they do take quite a while to set up. My other Omnijig, it took me about 5 hours to get that one set up, and part of the reason for that is because the radial arm saw that I was using to cut the boards square on the ends was only cutting square when the board was held on the right side of the blade, and it was not cutting square when the board was held on the left side of the blade. I've got that problem straightened out now, and if you want to learn more about using one of these jigs to create half-blind dovetails, I created a video a year ago showing this jig in more detail than what I'm showing here. I've got my drawer laid out here. This is the front of the drawer, back of the drawer, left side of the drawer, and right side of the drawer. On each of these, what I've done is I've marked the location of where the drawer bottom is going to be. It may not be showing up on the camera, but there's a very light pencil line going across. And I've also labeled these. This is the left side, this is the front, this is the back, this is the back piece right here. So I've labeled it back in the center. I've drawn in roughly where the drawer bottom will go. And I've also labeled, this is the left side, that's the right side. This is the right piece, so it has right written into the middle of it. And this is the back of the drawer, that's the front of the drawer. The drawer bottom would go into here, where you can see that it's been marked. And this is the drawer front. Here you can see where the drawer bottom will go. Here's the right side and the left side. What I want to do is I want to lay these down flat on the table so that the inside of the drawer is up. The inside of the drawers, at least for the drawer fronts and the drawer backs, always go up on this jig. For the drawer sides, the inside of the drawers always go out facing the operator. And so that's critical that you know where that bottom of the drawer is going to be at, because that always goes up against the stops that are set on the jig. We're going to start out with the left front corner of the drawer box, and we'll be setting that up over on the left side of the jig. when we start doing the right front side of the drawer box, we'll do that on the right side of the jig. At the back of the drawer, we actually have to reverse things. The left side back will be done on the right side of the jig, and the right side back will be done on the left side of the jig. So hopefully we won't get too confused. I'm going to move the camera slightly so that hopefully you're able to see a little more clearly what I'm doing with a router. Okay, let's start out with the right front of the drawer box, since the camera is positioned closest to this corner. What I want to do is I want to take the side that has the drawer bottom right here. So this is the front, and I'm going to put that through the front of the jig, and I need to bring it up until it almost touches the surface on the bottom side. There's a little ruler over here on the side, and I want to make it so that this board is touching that ruler. Right now I don't want it touching the bottom of this template. Then I'll lock it down so that it can't move. Now I'll take the front of the drawer, specifically the right side of the front of the drawer. Here's the drawer bottom that goes against the stop over here. I'll bring it up, and there's a stop right down here that may not show up on the camera, but I need to have the board resting up against that stop and also pushed up against this board here. Okay, then when I've got it in position up against the stop here and up against this board, then I can lock this handle down just like that, and then I can verify what I need to change. So I need to change the position of this board, so I'm going to release the lock. I'll bring it up, push it again against the stop over at the side, lock it down, and then just do a finger test here to see whether or not it's flush all the way across. And it looks like I've got that good. I'm not seeing any gaps between the boards, and so now we should be ready to route. I've already put some paste wax onto the surface, and I let it dry, and then I buffed it off. I did the same thing to the base of the router, and so now we should be ready to start routing. The first routing cut will actually be a climb cut, routing backwards across the face of this to hopefully eliminate any kind of chip out that we might have. And here's the router that I've got. It has a bushing in the bottom, and it has a router bit that's a 1/2 inch wide, 14 degree, mounted into it. Okay, so I've got it up on the jig, and now I want to turn it on. Right across the face. Now I've done the climb cut across the front, and I can start routing. And one finger to the neck, following the template. So in about 35 seconds, you have a half-blind dovetail joint, if you don't count the time that it takes you to put the boards into the jig. It was just that quick. And now I can take it out of the jig. And there you can see the two parts to the half-blind dovetail joint. And now these should go together nicely, just like you can see here. Okay, I want to put these back down onto the table in exactly the same position where they were before. And then I'll get the left side of the drawer box and also the front of the drawer box, and I'm going to start setting this up. I'll move the camera over so that you can see a little bit more closely what I'm doing over here. Okay, I've installed the drawer side into the front of the jig, and I've loosely put the drawer front into the jig. I'm going to bring it over so that it's touching the stop that's right here. And I want it to touch the drawer side in the front here at the same time. Lock it down. And you got to make sure that it's locked down tightly. Okay, so now I can move the position of the drawer side so that it's touching the bottom of the jig here. Lock it down. Okay, so that's looking good. I've got a very small gap right here. Let's see if I can get rid of that. Okay, so this is feeling flush. Now I'm ready to route. Okay, again I'll do a climb cut across the front. Until you're experienced using this type of a jig, I'd suggest that you turn off the router while it's still on the jig and wait until the router completely stops turning until you remove it from the jig, so that you don't end up tearing up these fingers, because at this point it's almost impossible to get another one of these sets of fingers. Although there was a seller out on eBay a couple years ago that was selling these fingers for about $80. So there may still be an option for you if you do tear up the fingers. Okay, so now we can take this out of the clamp. Here's the drawer side, specifically the left side. So I'll put that on to the left side so that these dovetails are at the front. And then I'll take this one out and I'll put that back onto the table so that it is correctly positioned so that the drawer bottom here is facing inward. Okay, next up, while we're here, over on the left side of the jig, let's do the back right side of the drawer box. So I'm going to take the right side that has the drawer bottom right here, and that'll go up against the stop once again. Bring it up so that it almost touches. Lock it down. Okay, now I'll take the right side. Here's the drawer bottom right here, so I know that that goes up against the stop. Now get it positioned so that it's flush here in the front, all the way across, and then it's against the stop. Now I can move this board into position. Lock it down, and now we're ready to cut. Okay, I missed a little bit right there, so I can come back and I can do that without any problems. Okay, now we can step over to the other side here and do the last remaining corner. I'll move the camera over so that you're able to see a little bit more closely. Okay, I'm just putting the drawer side into position. Don't want it to quite touch this template yet. Lock it down. Here's the drawer back that I got to move into position. I've got a little bit of sawdust that I got to blow out of the way there. Okay, I got to make sure that it's flush here with the drawer side. Lock it down. Okay, now I can move this board up till it's contacting these fingers and it's flush going across. Now it feels like it may be up a little bit too high. There we go, like that. Okay, now we're ready to do our cut. Okay, so now if we've done everything right, this should result in a very tight joint. I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier or not, but it only took about 2 hours to get this Omnijig set up. Once I already had that 5116 Omnijig set up. What threw me off, however, is that the position of where these ruler stops need to go are different on the two different jigs, even though the jigs behave exactly the same way. Okay, so we'll get this out of the clamps and up onto the workbench, and we'll take a look and see whether or not this goes together on the workbench. I should also mention that once you get the jigs set up and the routers set up, you never want to adjust those, never use them for anything other than just doing these half-blind dovetails so that you're not wasting an hour or 2 hours getting everything set up again. Okay, let's see if we can get the joint to go together. I've got to figure out where these pieces need to go. Make sure that I've got the left side here. Okay, this is the left side. So let's join the left side together. Just like so. And it's going to go together quite tight. And so I have to actually use a mallet to drive it together. And there you can see that the joint is almost closed up. Let me do it a little bit more here. And there you can see that it should be pretty much flush, and we should have good alignment pretty much all the way around. Okay, now we need to do the drawer front next. Should probably clear out these chips here so that they're not going to get in our way. And obviously, if you were putting this together for a permanent drawer, you'd want to have glue in the joint. Okay, let's see if that lined up nicely. That did. Okay, now we can put this other side on. I've got to make sure I've got the bottom of it lined up with the bottom here. Okay, so that went together nicely. I've got a slight alignment problem here. It must be that I didn't have one of the boards up against the stop, but that doesn't happen in all the corners. You can easily sand that down. Now, when I was sizing these boards, I had to make these boards roughly 7/8 of an inch, or a little bit more than that, short of the full length of this box. And the box is once again 16 inches long. So this sideboard had to be about 15 1/8, or 1/32 of an inch shorter than that. And of course this board here is 9 inches wide. Okay, I'd say that that turned out nicely. Now let's see if we can go over to the horizontal pantograph machine and create a through dovetail. And normally when you're creating dovetail joints, you want to have a half pin at the top and also at the bottom of the dovetail joint. And so, because the Omnijig has spacing of 7/8 of an inch from the center of one dovetail to the center of the next dovetail, I actually had to make those drawer sides 4 3/8 inch wide so that I ended up with a half pin at the top and also at the bottom. With a horizontal pantograph solution, I have variably spaced templates up here. These are the 10-degree templates. And so I have a 10-degree dovetail bit from Woodpeckers installed in here. And now I just have a sample board up here that I just want to do a quick test with. What I've done is I've placed these outside templates so that they're centered on 4 1/4 inches in both the locations, and then I just put this one right in the center. I've got the fence here at 2 1/8 inches off the center line of the table, and because this board is 4 1/4 inches, that should have just centered everything so that it should just work for us. And now what I'll be doing is I'll be guiding this down through the center of the slots. So this test board here represents a sideboard, and we'll use this a little bit later just to do some verification. We may not actually need to do this if we do these joints often. So now I've got the template holder set at about 5/16 of an inch so that when this is positioned at the very top of the templates, it will not be touching the board here. The board should not be touched when I spin the bit, and also at the bottom that should be true. I should be able to come into the bottom of the template before I touch the board. I have the backstop set so that I can butt this board up to it when I'm clamping the board down to the table, and then the front stop is set so that there's a 3/4 inch gap to allow the router to go forward 3/4 of an inch, which is the thickness of our boards. Okay, so let's do a quick test cut. And what I want to do here is I'm going to cut starting out from the bottom, going up about halfway, and then once I get this cut on the bottom here for each template, then I'll come around and I'll go through the top of the template, and hopefully that'll give me a clean cut on both the inside and the outside. Okay, it looks like we're ready to get started. I've got dust collection. I'll turn it on, but it won't be very effective because I won't have the dust collection brush installed so that you're able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so our test board has been cut. So we're going to be getting some very large dovetails with a very small pin in comparison. The pin will be, of course, a 1/2 inch wide here because that's the size of the dovetail bit that I used. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's install our other boards that we're going to be using for our drawer. I've got the parts marked out exactly the same way, with the drawer bottom marked out, and also the sides are marked, and the front and the back are marked to identify the parts. And now we can put those up onto the table, starting out with the drawer sides. And as a matter of fact, I'll be starting out with the left side of the drawer. And in that case, I'll be putting the left side bottom up against the fence. And when I do the right side, then I actually have it away from the fence. Essentially just the same way we were doing it with that Omnijig. If we're only talking about a positioner on the left side, that's essentially how we did it on that Omnijig as well. Okay, so this is the left front that I have. Need to get it into position. Okay, now I can route this exactly the same way as I did the last one. So here's the first cut on our drawer side. Now I need to do this back side here, so I'll just rotate it around. And now that side's going to be away from the fence for the drawer bottom. Quite similar to how we were doing it with that Omnijig. Okay, now I'll bring up the right side. Okay, so here's the front of the right side, and here's the bottom of the drawer. I actually need to have this flipped over, like so that the bottom of the drawer is away from the fence. Okay, so now I can set up for doing the drawer front and back, and to do that I need to install a 3/8 inch spiral bit into the router. I'll make a couple adjustments here and then I'll bring the camera back. Okay, I have the 3/8 inch wide spiral bit mounted into the router now, and I have it positioned correctly so that it will cut in 3/4 of an inch. Now what I've done is I've come up here and I've set the board for the drawer side just like this, and I made some pencil marks roughly where I can see these corners at. And now I can take this router bit, come around, and then if I butt up against the template, bring it down to where it's making contact right there, I can see that I've got a little bit over 1/4 inch between the bit and this outer edge, which means that we're going to be leaving some extra space there. I use just less than 3/8 of an inch to set the template holder height, so it could very well be I've got to bring it up to 3/8 of an inch. So let's give this a test cut and see if it works. I'm going to do the same thing that I did the last time. I'll come up from the bottom and do some cutting, and then I'll come up to the top and finish it off. Okay, let's see if this fits. Okay, it does fit. It is still ever so slightly too loose. And what that means is I need to drop the template holder down a little bit further, and then we can do another cut. Okay, I'll take it down to 1/4 inch. I don't know if that's the right size or not. So let's see where we ended up with that 1/4 inch setup block in here. Okay, I'd say that went together nicely. It does look like our forward stop moved slightly, unfortunately. So we actually ended up cutting deeper than 3/4 inch. Okay, so now we're ready to cut our boards. Since we did get a tight joint, although it ended up being a little bit loose because the front stop slipped. Yeah, I have the drawer front up here. This is actually the left side of the drawer front. And so I've got the drawer bottom here. When these are positioned down to the table, you always put the inside of the drawer up on the table. Okay, let's do a quick test with the actual piece. See whether or not it fits. That should be a nice tight joint. It does go together. Okay, now we can spin this around and do the other side. Let's work together. Okay, let's take it over to the workbench and see if we can assemble the box. Okay, I have the boards roughly positioned, how they'll go together. Let's start the assembly. Hopefully everything fits tightly together. Okay, it did go together without too much difficulty. Unfortunately, some of this wood is a little bit brittle, and it split out a little bit right there. I'm sure that we can fill that in so that nobody would even notice it. It looks like the joints are pretty tight. I think that worked out okay. Okay, now since this is the last episode of this video series, I thought we would talk about some of the other possible box corner joints that you might encounter. Here, for example, is a nap joint or a pin and cove joint. There is a template for my horizontal pantograph machine to create that type of a joint. This was an alternative to half-blind dovetails quite a few years ago. It was a machine-made joint when they couldn't make half-blind dovetails using machine methods. Let's see, here's another one. This is a table saw locking miter joint. As you can see, the very corner of it is a miter joint, and then there's a rabbet inside. The next one that I've got here is one that Andrew Klein created, and he marketed it through Rockler. This is a miter fold joint. There you can see it going together. That's done on the table saw using a special dado blade and a special blade that he created that went along with it. I don't think that this is on the market anymore for creating this joint, but it is kind of an interesting joint that you can create using a sheet of plywood. Simply fold up that sheet of plywood after it's cut a couple times, and you've got yourself a small drawer box. Okay, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.